Hello and welcome everybody to Friday's edition of the United Road. Mainly because I was busy Tuesday, so we couldn't do it on Tuesday. But I'm very pleased to say it's a Friday night. I thought I'd be your podcast just before we all go out for beers, before we all go out for meals and curries and whatever you want to do. So why don't you listen to me and lovely football journalist and writer and commentator Callum McFadden. Callum, massive welcome to you, mate, and thank you very much for doing this. Welcome.
Yeah,
How are you doing,
an
mate?
absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me. Really looking forward to it.
Well, I feel like we wouldn't have said that probably about a week ago, but it seems to be a little bit of excitement in the air at the moment, doesn't it, to be fair? Tell me about the last few days, as a football fan, as a United fan, as just what do you make of everything at the moment?
It's been a strange time at the moment, just with how quickly everything's moved. I think a lot of people, myself included, expected Eric Ten Hag, if he was going to move on, to depart the club at the last international break. So when things went silent after the Ineos meeting, just during that break, I think I expected that he would probably be in it for the sort of medium term, even if it was a case of getting through to the end of the season. I just felt that was the time to make a change. Everyone could see that the results were underwhelming, and as I say, I thought a change would have happened there. So when he continued on for the last set of games, obviously culminating last week, I just felt that he would potentially be continuing on for the foreseeable, or if he was going to leave, that would happen. I thought maybe Ruben Amorim would be in charge until the summer to buy a lot of time. But fair play to Ineos and the football department at United. United have been criticised over the years for not being decisive, but they've been very decisive here. They've got their new manager, albeit it's going to take a little while to take over officially as head coach, but you just have to say well done to them for being decisive and getting their man rather than dragging it out for a long period.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is bizarre, isn't it? I feel like recently, it's probably been the case of the past few years when United ever need a new manager. It's always a case of they need to be freely available. And it's nice to know that this time a new manager's come in, but we've actually just gone, do you know what, we want him from that club, we're going to go get him from that club. And it seems to be a case of, strangely, that money hasn't been an issue to pay out a release clause or a compensation clause. And given the talk around the money issues at United and the cost cuts and the redundancies that have happened at the club, it is. I don't think it's very expected. And to be fair, what you just said there about Ruben Nistelrooy, and obviously he's now in an interim period, but I think a lot of us probably expected that to be the case until the summer. So with Ruben Amorim coming in, what do you make of the appointment? What is it you know about him?
In terms of the appointment, I think it's a very solid appointment for United in the sense that Ruben Amorim is one of the up and coming coaches around European football. The job that he has done in Portuguese football, not just at Sporting, but also at Braga as well, has been nothing short of fantastic. He started out with the B team of Braga, very quickly got the call up to manage their first team, and then within a matter of months delivered a League Cup, which was so well received by not only Braga supporters, but the wider sort of Portuguese football and community, that Sporting Lisbon decided to pay €10 million to get him out of his contract after only seeing him manage for 6 months at first team level. So that shows you how much of an impact he made straight away as a manager. And then from there, he was able to deliver Sporting's first title in a couple of decades. He's then been able to back that up with another title recently. They're in pole position at the moment to go and get a third title of what would be his reign. But as we know, obviously, he's committed to United now, and his reign in Lisbon is coming to an end. But a really strong manager in the sense that he has a very commanding personality. You just have to listen to him speak. He speaks perfect English, so there's not going to be any real communication issues as well, which is important.
He sounds so like Ronaldo as well, don't you think?
He does.
I genuinely closed my eyes. I was like, he sounds the exact same.
It is interesting, and obviously
I know
he's
they're from
been
the
linked
same
with
country,
Mourinho
but
as well.
it's so like technically we're both from the United Kingdom, but we don't sound the same, do we? It's very strange. So is he from Madeira or something? Because I couldn't believe how similar they sounded.
In terms of him, he's actually from Lisbon, so he's obviously someone that knows the city, has done for a long time in his life, and obviously is now managing there as well.
Yeah, fair. I mean, it seems to be. I mean, he seems to have been lauded quite a lot, Amorim, and I think it was obviously talked about with Liverpool in the summer, potential successor to Pep in the summer, in next summer. How good is he? Like, could he be the one for United?
I think in terms of being the one for United, that is something that is going to take time. I think most people would admit that the squad that United have at the moment isn't the most balanced squad, and obviously he favours a sort of 3-4-3 system. So that's also going to be interesting to see how players can adapt. I actually think this United squad will suit a back three because I think in terms of playing with four at the back, the centre backs, especially Delict and Maguire, even Lindelof if he has to be called upon, Johnny Evans, none of them really possess great pace. So I actually think United playing a back three would be beneficial to them, particularly when Lenny Yoro comes back to full fitness because he's only 18. You don't want to throw him into a back four, all the pressures of the Premier League and competing in the Europa League. So I actually think a back three would help his transition as well. So I think it's not the most balanced United squad we've ever seen, but I think the system that he wants to play will suit United, given that Mazraoui's used to playing as a wing back. Luke Shaw, if he ever returns to full fitness, it seems like he's been out for an eternity. Can suit that kind of system where he likes going forward as well. So I certainly think that although this squad isn't the most balanced, he could make an immediate impact if he can get the players buying into the system.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell you what, though, with the squad being so suited to a three at the back system, like you said, do you think this appointment's been a long time coming? Do you think this has been planned for longer than we actually know?
You have to wonder. Obviously, Ineos looked in the summer at various managers. Thomas Tuchel was spoken to. They also made communication with Kieran McKenna, Thomas Frank's representatives. So they were looking around, and I certainly think that when you look at this appointment, how quick it's been suggests that it's been in the pipeline for a while. The fact that Ten Hag left and then within a matter of days, negotiations have been concluded and you've got a new manager in post. So, as I say, for me, I certainly think it's an appointment that they have been thinking about for a period of time. Whether Amorim was always their first choice, I don't quite know because I think Thomas Tuchel was who Sir Jim Ratcliffe favoured, but obviously he's now the England manager and Amorim is in at United.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it does seem to be. I mean, it's a really good point you make, but I think with the likes of Delict, Martinez, Yoro, Maguire, even, and Johnny Evans, and I think Lindelof probably will be surplus to requirements. I know Evans is obviously probably at the twilight end of his career. With three at the back and the likes of Maguire, we have got four solid centre backs there, I feel, who could probably chop and change. I think if we were to play three at the back system, we might need one more. Maybe a Jared Branthwaite would be brilliant for that. I do think with the wing back situation, I think Mazraoui and Delo are probably decent for that. I would say Shaw is, but he's just never available. And obviously, Malassi has had major knee problems over the last, I think, 16 months it is now. So, where would you see improvements needed in terms of would you need to buy another centre back and maybe a left back to allow us to fully implement Amarim's system?
I think another centre back would certainly be a sensible option with playing a back three. Left back, certainly, you're right, needs to be addressed given the fitness issues of both Shaw and Malacia. Yes, Dallo can do a job there, but he's more natural on the right hand side, and having Dallo and Mazraoui in that right hand side gives you depth as well, which is crucial. So I certainly think that those positions would be key. And the other position that I think is screaming out for United potentially is in the striking department because although you've got Rasmus Højlund, who is a really exciting young talent, you've got Joshua Zirkzee settling into the club in his time in English football. I certainly think that if a more established number nine became available, then United would certainly look at that. Obviously, probably in the summer. There's been a lot of talk. Would he bring Victor Gyökeres from Sporting to
Thank you
United with him?
so much for saying that because I was going to suggest him and I couldn't pronounce his name. So I'm so glad you brought it up for me instead.
Not a problem. Well, obviously, he's been in English football before. He was at Brighton as a young player, then made the move to Coventry where he shone under Mark Robbins. But he's obviously moved to Sporting. He's doing really well there and scoring goals not only in domestic Portuguese football, he's added goals to his game in European competitions, notably in the Champions League this season. So it'll be interesting to see if he's someone that is targeted by United and maybe even other Premier League clubs.
Would you think? I mean, I think the natural link, especially for the media out there at the moment, is probably Gyökeres from Sporting. Obviously, I know he was at Coventry, so he has that slight experience in England. Do you think he's probably at the level now where you expect him to go to a bigger club? No disrespect to Sporting Lisbon, but obviously Ruben Amorim is maybe taking that step up to United. Obviously, there was talk of him going to Liverpool, and they decided to go the way of Arne Slot because of the three at the back thing. Obviously, there was talk of potentially City as his next club. So there was all these stepping stones for him from Sporting. Do you think likewise for Gyökeres, who could potentially go to that bigger club now?
I think he will look to do that. And to be fair to a club like Sporting and even their city rivals, Benfica, they are clubs who like to develop their own young talent from their own academies and sometimes recruit players from, South America and then sell them on for profit. And I don't see this being any different with Gyökeres in this circumstance because they've bought him in, albeit it was a club record fee that they paid, but they will be able to treble that at least when they sell him on. And I certainly think that he will want to make the move back to the Premier League. Obviously, he played for Coventry and made great impacts in the Championship, but I'm sure he'll want to test himself in the Premier League if he can get that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think it is probably a fairly exciting time now with a really exciting young manager. I think as well, look, ultimately, we're not going to know. And I think it's probably not as a big an excitement as there was probably with Ten Hag and previous managers before, because it feels like we have been here before. It feels like ultimately we're a bit more reserved this time. I think in terms of Amorim, we just want to see him do well, because I don't think a lot of us fans have got another new manager left in us, have we? It's just quite difficult to have to always do this. I don't know how Chelsea and other clubs did it, to be honest.
Well, as you say, in terms of the turnover of managers, Chelsea are probably the real exception that for many years seemed to make it work, where they could change managers regularly and seemed to always end up there or thereabouts in terms of challenging for the biggest honours. At United, that's obviously not been the case. You have to argue that Jose Mourinho is probably the most successful manager post Ferguson so far, in the sense that he delivered a Europa League title, which again, in a sense, showed you how far United had fallen, in the sense that they were in that competition in the first place. But as I say, I think when you look at it over the piece, he's probably the most successful because it still is a major European honour that he was able to deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of trophy wise, you couldn't really argue that. I mean, I suppose if you really wanted to, you could say the Community Shield doesn't really count. So technically, him and Ten Hag are tied. I don't know. I'm sure Mourinho would argue differently. But moving on from Amorim, because I think in terms of viewers and things like that, I think there's probably much better people than me. You probably know more than me. I've done some research on him. I know he likes obviously three at the back. I know he likes his win backs really high. I know he likes a centre back to step into the midfield to help that, and then the transition to go forward. He likes diamonds across the pitch with a direct centre forward with a really fluid forward line. I basically memorised that off a TikTok video or so that's as much as I know about him. But from what I'm hearing, from what I'm seeing from experts, he seems to be a very lauded coach. He's been linked with massive clubs. So from the things I'm hearing, it seems like a really good coup for Ineos, and hopefully he hits the ground running with us. The big thing for me as well is the fact that he's a head coach, not a manager. It seems like they've hired a head coach to fit in with the new structure, which is, I think, probably something that maybe was a little bit more of Ten Hag's downfall as well, which brings me nicely onto the subject. Was it time to go?
I think that it's undoubtedly it was time for a decision to be made. I actually think when you look back to the summer, they should have had the courage of their conviction to make the change, because it was evident, by the fact that they were talking to other managers, that they weren't fully convinced. And I think if that was in the back of their minds, which it clearly was, they should have made the change then, because I think it was always going to be messy, in the sense that they obviously extended the contract by triggering the option for the 1 year extension, but that was never convincing. It's not as if they gave him a new 4 year contract or something that suggested he was their man going forward. Without doubt, and the comments of Omar Barada and Dan Ashworth before the Liverpool match, where they basically made a point of saying on record that we weren't involved in the contract
Yeah,
situation of
absolutely.
triggering the extension. and obviously making that decision. So when they said that, I just sensed that if there was a tricky spell, they would make a change now that they were officially in the building.
It's a great point, that, to be fair, because do you know what? It wasn't out and out backing that, was it? It was kind of, look, we were here when we extended his contract. We are now, so if there's an issue, we'll make the decision if we need to. And I think it kind of showed a lot, really, that the right people probably still weren't in charge until July, just because I don't think an FA Cup win was probably enough for Ten Hag to keep his job, given the performances for so long. Because I actually think the performances haven't been great, probably since the League Cup final. I think he's soldiered on and carried on, and there's been moments where we've been decent, but I don't ever think there was a consistent run of results. And yes, you can blame the injuries, but I don't really think a team needs the first team squad all the time available to be able to play the way you want to. That's the point of having a squad, so that they all can play a way that you see as your vision. What do you think his biggest downfall was? Because I think some of the things that he did, I think his press conferences, I don't think he helped himself with his comments, the constant need to mention the trophies, whilst completely neglecting the fact performances weren't any good, the fact that we finished 8th in the league. I think there was a few things in the downfall that eventually shown that he probably wasn't a long-term United manager, and I'll always thank him for the memories. I'll always thank him for the trophies. And I don't think there's any shame in criticising a manager when you can see things aren't going right or well. I think there's obviously a line you don't want to cross like some people do, but there's nothing wrong with criticising the manager or necessarily even the players, to be fair, as long as you don't go over that line. But I just think Ten Hag was showing that it wasn't working and it wasn't right going forward. Would you agree?
I think so. When you look at the situation, you mentioned the League Cup final. Since then, obviously the Liverpool result away at Anfield, I don't think he ever fully recovered from that. Not winning a game in European competition for around a year for a club of United's heritage and history, that's just unacceptable in itself. Finishing eighth in the Premier League despite winning the FA Cup, that has to raise alarm bells. David Moyes was maligned, and rightly so, for his time in charge of the club because it simply wasn't good enough. But he finished seventh, so he was even finishing below that sort of barometer where David Moyes was, and where everyone agreed was completely unacceptable for a club the size of United. So I think he was always, in a sense, on a hiding to nothing when the league position was so poor. And when you look at the worst starts of United's Premier League history, 2 out of 3 of them are on Ten Hag's name. He's the one who was in charge. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer being the other. So I think the fact that he wasn't starting season strongly, he was complaining about injuries, understandably so. I think there was 66 injuries or something like that last season. But when you look at it, you have to question training methods and what's going on in the training ground when there are so many injuries of the nature that United were having. Because you look at Liverpool, you look at City, you look at Arsenal. Yes, they pick up niggles here and there, but never to the volume that United had. And for me, that was always an alarm bell that was ringing.
But that's another thing that he didn't take accountability for, though, right? You can't have that amount of injuries and just not say you just can't not take any accountability for that. Like, there must be a thing, and now it's kind of carried on into this season almost, or he tried to perceive it had. When, in my opinion, I think the only person that was actually out injured, really, that he could use in the first team was Luke Shaw, and that's not really anything that's a surprise. Luke Shaw's famously got quite a bad injury record, so it's not something that you can't not prepare for. And I think when you come into this new season, like you say, I think with the right structure in place back in May, I don't think he would have made it to the new season. And the fact that he did have his contract extended, or well, it was just an extension triggered, wasn't it? So it wasn't really a new contract, I suppose you could argue, but his that sort of a little bit of faith that was shown to him, effectively, he had to hit the ground running this season. He had to show, look, I appreciate your faith in me. I will turn this around in the league. And instead, it just felt like he kept saying the same thing about trophies, there was no accountability for the performances. He kept just completely ignoring the fact that we finished 8th. Another bad start to the season this year, and then just using an excuse of injuries. The lack of accountability, the constant need to mention trophies, the complete ignorant side of ignoring the performances and the lack of structure and style of play that other managers have come in and immediately changed and implemented, and you've seen impact and results. It just made you question, well, why are we still being told, oh, it needs to wait, we need to have this patience and this 2-year plan and all that, when other managers seem to come to their clubs and just immediately make this impact? So all of that, along with what he was saying and what we were seeing on the pitch, it just felt harder to defend him. And in Old Trafford, we'd always back the manager, and it's the one place in the world where you will always get behind the team. And obviously online was quite different. I think a lot of people were voicing the opinion of, I'll back the manager, but I'm finding it hard to. And you'll always want your team to win no matter who the manager is. I just think it was hard to defend him. And at the end, I obviously wrote an article on unitedroad.com that I couldn't defend what he was doing anymore, and I could really see a change being probably for the best. Um, how do you think it's going to impact the signings he made? What should anyone be worried?
I
And if
think
so, who?
when any new manager comes in, if you've been signed under the previous regime, then nothing's guaranteed in terms of the new manager wanting you or feeling like you're going to fit into his plans. What I would say is Amorim's coming in mid-season, so this is the squad he's going to be working with to the summer. I don't see United making any real incomings of note in January. So yes, a few players may leave on loan or in permanent transfers, but I certainly I certainly think that the bulk of the squad that is at United at the moment will be the squad that Amorim's working with to the summer at the very earliest. So I think any top coach, when they inherit a squad, has to just get in, implement their ideas on the group, but also get the best out of the players they've got at their disposal. And you look at different managers over the years that have managed to improve players that are already at the club that they're at. Jurgen Klopp arrived at Liverpool and was able to take players on to another level. Jordan Henderson's maybe not having the best time of it in recent years, but he was certainly someone under Jurgen Klopp that was able to really improve as a footballer and get to the point where he was sort of one of the first names in that Liverpool team sheet every week and captained the club, which you would never really have foreseen in his early years at Liverpool. So that just shows you what an elite manager and elite coach can do. And there's players at United that undoubtedly can improve. Mason Mount, for instance, has been out injured quite a lot. If he was to get himself fit, could a new manager come in and potentially help him show some of the form that made United want to buy him in the first place? Potentially a back three, I think, would suit a player like De Ligt much more than the back four has at the moment. So I certainly think there's approaches that Amorim can take to get more out of the players. Even though Ten Hag signed them, I still think there's Amorim could get more out of them. Even though Ten Hag arguably knew them more than most. So I think that'll be an interesting thing to see. And with any new manager, you want them to put their own stamp on it longer term with signings, but they have to improve players. And Amorim, to be fair, has a track record of bringing players through. You think of Pedro Porro that's at Spurs now. He was a player Amorim brought through at Sporting, made a big money move to Tottenham, and he's doing really well. So, there's other examples. Marcus Edwards, who's at Sporting, he came the other way. He was at Tottenham, made the move to Sporting. He now looks like a player who, if he was going to leave Portugal, would have his pick of clubs in some of Europe's top 5 leagues. So he's certainly a manager that can improve players, and that has to be one of the objectives for him when he arrives in Manchester.
Yeah, I'm really glad you made the point there, because it seems to be the case that there isn't really any money for signings in January. So these players he does need to improve. The likes of who you mentioned there, Gyökeres, Edwards, obviously Pedro Porro. These are players that he had and he's improved. And there's players at United who I still think they've got another level, and whether the previous regime, in terms of how the style of play, just didn't get the best out of them. I think De Ligt definitely will be better in a back three. I do think Mason Mount will be fairly decent in a new structure under Amorim. I do worry for Xerxes. I don't know how he'd quite fit in, especially with the likes of Bruno and Mount, because I think he likes to sort of play two attacking midfielders with the wing backs dead high, doesn't he? So I'd be surprised if Xerxes has somewhere, which is a shame, because I actually don't think he's as bad as some people are making out. I just think he's had a really bad start to life in England, and he certainly wouldn't be the only one. It is quite exciting to wonder what's going to happen, and I think one of the major things Ineos are going to be expecting of him is to improve players. And like I say, I think the likes of Rashford, every manager in Europe wants to work with Rashford. Amorim gets to, so can we now see the best of him? He's had a good start to the season. Can we now start seeing more goals come out of him? Can we put him closer to goal, which Ten Hag wasn't doing? So there's plenty to look forward to in that sense. Which players do you think should be worried though? Because I know there's obviously Ten Hag signings, but there's obviously, like I said there, I don't think Xerxes will fit quite well to Amorim. Is there anyone that should genuinely be worried? Like, I don't think I have a future here. And there's one player that springs to my mind, but I'll refrain from saying him.
I think at the moment you would have to look at some of the older players in the squad. Casemiro being one, arguably, Christian Eriksen, Harry Maguire. Um, I
I'm
just think
surprised you say
because they are
Maguire.
at an age that, where their best years are behind them now, I think for a manager like Amorim coming in to put his stamp in the team, he will want to work with young players that have development in them. These players can still be useful in the meantime to the summer because, as I say, I don't think all of them are going to go in one fell swoop. So I think he will have to work with them, but I don't see them being at the forefront of what he wants to do in charge of United.
Why would you say Maguire out of interest? I
The
thought
reason
he, I thought it'd be quite useful.
I just think Harry Maguire's best years as a footballer are behind him. That's a personal opinion. Yes, a back
Yeah,
three would certainly suit his skill set more than a
that
back
was
four,
what
and
I
that
thought.
he's
Yeah.
obviously proven that with England. But I just personally think his best years as a footballer are behind him now. And to be honest with you, I've never been convinced that he was of the sufficient quality to be a Manchester United centre half. If United are striving to get back to winning Premier League titles and Champions Leagues, I don't think Harry Maguire was ever at that level. I think he was certainly someone that could come in and help United get the building blocks to get there. But I never, if you were asking me, United are going to go far in the Champions League. Is Harry Maguire one of the centre backs? I would say absolutely not.
Yeah, absolutely, I'd agree with that. Just want to say hello to some people in the comments. Obviously, Jarvis, always a pleasure to see you, mate. Stu, nice to see you as well. A really good mate of mine is in the comments as well. Trevor Lynch, it's absolutely great to see you, mate. I hope you're doing very well as well. Obviously, I think in terms of what's going on at the moment, I think it's probably uncertain for quite a few players' future, and it's not. Yeah, it's natural. There's different. I think, like you say, with some of the signings, I'd like to think that some of the signings were made with Amorim in mind. I genuinely think they were at this point, especially with the amount of centre backs we signed. Obviously, with two centre backs, we were definitely in for Branthwaite as well. So that's three centre backs in one that we were trying to get. I think there was some kind of idea or style of play from Ineos' side that three at the back was probably ideal for us. And that's what makes me think, was Amorim on the radar all along? And we ended up extending Ten Hag's contract, and it just sort of didn't quite work out. Probably similar to the fact that it didn't work out at Liverpool, because I think he was adamant on the three at the back, and I don't think Liverpool wanted to change that, given obviously Van Dijk's getting on now. I think they'd need a bigger structural overhaul in terms of the amount of players they'd need to sign, especially centre backs, because they're probably very much more suited to two at the back. They'd need to sign two or three centre backs immediately, I think, to even go to a three, and it doesn't suit Van Dijk, I don't think, too much. So, but moving on. One player that I've actually wrote about today, it's the latest article on the UnitedRoad.com, so go and check it out, everyone. But I wrote about Manuel Ugarte, a player very familiar with Ruben Amorim. What do you make to his start to life in Manchester?
I think it's certainly been indifferent, but to be fair to him, I think he was kind of hung out to dry a little bit by Ten Hag by the fact that he wasn't
I agree.
necessarily starting certain games, and Ten Hag was talking about the need for this long adaptation period. Whereas I don't necessarily think that is necessary. We've seen other players come to English football in the past in similar positions. You think of Fernandinho at Manchester City, even Rodri, who have arrived from different leagues and they've come in and been able to make an impact. Ugarte was very highly regarded in Portugal when he was with Amorim. They paid a club record fee to get him in, a club record fee at the time. Gyökeres has since been more. So they paid a club record fee to sign him at Sporting, and then they sold him on for big money to Paris Saint-Germain. So he's certainly a player with pedigree who I think should be able to make an impact this season on United. I mean, you just think, oh, I'm looking at some of the stats here that he had when he was working with Amorim in his second season. He had the most tackles won of any midfielder in the Portuguese league, the second most interceptions and ball recoveries, and he had the number one passing accuracy of any midfielder in the league too. So there's certainly a player in there. You've got a manager now that has worked with him. clearly believes in him because they paid such big money to get him to Sporting in the first place, and that surely can only be a good thing for him going forward.
That is proper research. That I didn't even think to go into that much detail in terms of his time with Amorim. I just thought it was going to be, yeah, he's very good. So fair play. I appreciate that. It's actually some really useful stats, that, because I was going to actually ask you a question on Ugarte. That a lot of people say that he's not his flaws, but not one of his strong points is him in on the ball, him in possession. And you mentioned his passing accuracy. Does that concern you? Does that worry you? Because one thing I wrote was, his strengths are more of a workhorse. He's more of an engine in midfield who will always hunt the ball down, try and win you the ball back, and effectively pass it to the player that's better on the ball to then create the play. I don't think he's someone that sits at the spine of the midfield and can help really dictate. And I think that was something that was of a concern of a lot of people. And I think some people have misprofiled him to be that player because of how bad our midfield was last season. And I think people are now judging him on something that he isn't, when they should be judging him the player he is. Do you have any concerns on his on the ball and in possession traits?
I don't, in the sense that I don't think he's helped at United, because the midfield at United is anything but compact. Any top midfield is compact, out of possession. And when they get in possession, yes, that's when you can stretch the game a little bit more. But from a compact starting position, you can make some quick passes and maybe open up the play, particularly in the wide areas. Which Amorim will obviously look to do with players like Garnacho and Rashford, who are very good in one-on-one situations. So for me, I think United with a more structured approach should suit Agarte. And at the moment, as you say rightly, he's maybe a player who is getting the ball from someone in the defence, and he's having to turn and maybe try and hit Hollywood pass rather than playing a simple 1-2 and keeping the game ticking along that he's been used to in Paris and in Lisbon. So hopefully a more structured, United team approach and midfield approach for sure could support him in that, because he's played at some really big clubs already. He's obviously a starter for the Uruguayan national team, and that's no mean feat as well. Especially under Bielsa. So I certainly think there's a player in there that has more to his game than he's been able to show at United so far. And as I say, in terms of the passing ability, maybe he's been asked to do try and play passes through the eye of a needle, whereas maybe he's someone that's better at keeping the game ticking over. So time will tell, but I certainly don't think he's as bad as some people have made out.
Yeah, I mean, it's some really good points actually, that, and I think Trevor made a little point as well there about the players that are around him, in particular Eriksen, Casemiro, who are two players that you said should maybe be worried for the future, just because of maybe their age and what Ruben wants in terms of young players in the team, and the fact that, as Trevor so eloquently puts, they run in treacle. um, do you think he needs that bit more around him who can do a bit more running alongside him to help him win the ball back? Because it was the concern, wasn't it, that he just wasn't that good on the ball, and maybe a João Neves, or maybe just someone who can help Kobe Mainu, because Kobe Mainu's played a lot of minutes. Is there something extra that we need? Like, because I don't think Ugarte is the saviour of our midfield, although he would have been lauded as that anyway because of how terrible our midfield was. But do you think Ugarte and somebody else is needed in our midfield
I think
in
another
terms of a new
option
signing?
Yeah, I think another option longer term in midfield would certainly be a sensible one, because although Kobe Mainoo has played many minutes, he is still a young player. He is still raw. He's not going to be, Mr. Consistent at the age he's at the moment. Yes, it's been great to see his progression and the opportunities that he's had for Manchester United and also for England. But realistically, you look at City, you look at Liverpool, you look at Arsenal at this moment, and they've got squads of players that they can call on, and sometimes you don't need to be the biggest name to make an impact. I mean, you look at that Liverpool midfield, Gravenberch, Soboslai, and Curtis Jones in recent weeks. None of them you would say are necessarily the biggest names in world football, but together as a three, they've been absolutely outstanding in games, and I think United need to get to a point where they can find partnerships all over the pitch that work. And sometimes it's not the sort of galactical approach of signing this big name from the Bundesliga or Serie A, or whatever it may be, to really get the team ticking forward. Sometimes you might as we've talked about, have a player in your squad at the moment that you can improve or work with and tweak their position, and get the most out of them. Because, as I say, the example I used there of Curtis Jones, is he someone on paper you would say is one of the best or most outstanding midfielders in the Premier League? Probably not. But you cannot deny that he's incredibly effective, and hopefully Amorim can find someone within it United, or someone who's maybe off the radar playing in Portugal or another league around Europe that can come in and make an impact in the sort of medium to longer term.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously Ugarte has come in. I think he'll be really good for United. I don't think it's any mean feat, and I don't think the way we've started this season has been good for any player. So I don't think it's no slate on him. I think he's a very good player, and I think he'll be great for our midfield. I just think there was valid concerns across some people that knew a lot more than I do. But I think when I watched him, I think on the ball, he did sometimes just have that hesitancy, whereas off the ball he was incredible and he was exactly what our midfield needed. I just wonder, did we need that little bit extra alongside him? Because I think he was a good signing. I think he was the right signing. I just think he's been massively misprofiled by fans, and I think he's been massively misused by Ten Hag. And I think the fact that Amorim's come in, I don't think he will be misprofiled, and I don't think he will be misused, and I think we'll actually start to see the best of Ugarte from now on. But of course, I did write that article. It was out today at 5 p.m. I have just dropped it in the comments if you want to go check that out. And I appreciate your thoughts on him as well, Callum. But just moving on to our last couple of things. Ruud van Nistelrooy, how do you think he did against Leicester? Was there a little bit of you that was a bit gutted it wasn't him named full-time manager?
I think obviously after the last situation where club legend coming in from sort of Wilderness and Ollie, I think it was amazing to see him. When he came out the tunnel, the way he's handled the media this week. Looking ahead to the Chelsea game was fantastic as well, and you certainly can't deny he looks the part. He looks as if he's got that stature as he did as a player and as a captain for a while at United, where he is a leader, he stands up, he can be counted. And what I would say is, obviously, the decision has to be Amorim's, and the club shouldn't put pressure on him to keep someone on the staff for the sake of it. But I certainly think he's got a lot to offer United in the long term, even if he isn't going to be the full time manager, as we know he won't be now with Manchester United. But very impressed by how he's conducted himself, even when Eric Ten Hag was in charge, how he conducted himself as well. So for me, he's a leader. He's someone that obviously has a real strong connection with Manchester United because he got offered the chance to manage Burnley in the summer. I know obviously Burnley and Manchester United aren't comparable in terms of
I
size of
mean,
clubs, but he turned down the chance to be a number one to come in as an assistant, which
well,
takes
that's the
some doing.
thing. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're obviously not comparable, but the jobs probably were, I suppose. I mean, a high up coach at United or a number one in Burnley, they're probably fairly similar in terms of what the jobs were, but in terms of clubs, obviously, there's no question. I mean, do you think he'll stay? Do you think he'll continue as a coach, or do you think he'll probably move on? I know his
I
comments have basically said he wants to stay, but do you think Amorim will want to keep him? I think he'd probably be silly not to keep him, given who he is, the stature he is, how respected he is by the fans, how good he is as a striker and a finisher. I think that'll help the forwards. You know, do the stars align to keep him?
I hope they do, but at the same time, the only other thing I would say, playing devil's advocate with that, is the fact that is Amorim looking at Ruud and the impact that he's made in that first game? Say he goes on and wins the next three games as well. Is he then thinking, if I have a sticky patch in a year, 18 months, that the successor's over my shoulder?
Yeah.
Rather than focusing on I'm working with my staff, it's a fresh approach, and this is what we're going to do. So I think the first thing I would say is I hope that Amorim takes the time to sit down with them and they can work something out rather than just making a decision on a whim, because he's certainly got a lot to offer Manchester United. But it'll be interesting to see if Amorim is confident enough to back himself and say, yes, I can work with them, let's do it together. Or will he take that viewpoint of, if I have a sticky situation like Ten Hag's had at the start of this season, um, could Ruud be the sort of next manager after me if things don't go well? So how he balances that will be interesting.
Yeah, no, completely agree with that. I mean, I love Ruud van Nistelrooy. He was one of my favourites when I was growing up. He was one of my favourite strikers ever at Man United, to be honest. So the nostalgic person in me, and it was probably why I love Solskjaer so much, would love him to stay. But I do appreciate there is a genuine football decision to be made in terms of you have to move the nostalgia to a side and actually make the right decision. So I'll be curious what actually happens in the coming weeks regarding it. Last couple of points now. 2 quick fire questions. One quick fire question and then briefly finishing on the Chelsea game coming up this weekend. If you could sign one player from Sporting Lisbon, who?
That's a good question.
Bear in mind the
That
current squad we have.
I think at the moment you have to say Gyökeres because he's a presence up front, and I think that United are crying out for that experienced striker who, is of a good age, 25, 26, who's been around the block a little bit and can come in. And I also think that would help Højlund. I feel sorry for Højlund in the sense that he's been recruited from Atalanta, very exciting young player, but he's been recruited as this exciting young striker and just been thrust into being United's number 9, which I think was always going to be a big ask for a young player. So
I think he's done
Gyökeres for
very
me.
well though, given those circumstances. And I think now with the new manager who really likes a direct number 9, I think he'll do brilliantly for us. And I've never questioned he wouldn't, to be fair.
Yeah, no, I think as you say, the more opportunities and if he can stay fit, the better. But I'd say for me, Gyökeres would be the man because I think Højlund could benefit from him as well.
Yeah, definitely. And just finishing up on the Chelsea game, what you expecting this weekend? Obviously, Rude's still in charge as well.
Do you know what? I think it will be a game with goals. I actually don't want to be too negative, but I think if United can avoid defeat, it would be really positive to keep that sort of unbeaten run going under Ruud. Because I think if he was to lose this game, convincingly, it's a frustrating one where you've obviously the high of beating Leicester to progress in the cup, and then if he was at one step forward, 2 steps back, and people will then, as soon as he loses a game, will start saying, "Oh, it's all about Amorim. It's all about Amorim." So for me, if he can avoid defeat, but being honest, I do think United have what it takes to go over the line, and I think they'll win by a goal. So I'm going to say 2-1 United.
Well, you answered the question. 2-1 United. I think I'll go 2-0 United. I think we found our shooting boots, didn't we, against Leicester? And I appreciate, obviously, it was the League Cup, so it's slightly different. But it was nice to see chances being created and chances being put in the back of the net, which is obviously something we've really not done this season in the league, which again was potentially something else you could criticise Ten Hag and the players for. But ultimately, Ten Hag obviously lost his job. We're going into a new era with a young, exciting manager in Ruben Amorim. And it looks like some players will get a chance, some won't. It looks like there's going to be loads of speculation about who we want to sign, as is always with Man United. But appreciate everyone for watching tonight. Obviously, brand new era dawning. We will be back on Tuesday on normal nights. Just this week was a bit busy. Callum, a massive thank you for you to come on. Really appreciate it. I've wanted to get you on for ages and appreciate Keane trying to sort that out for me as well. Where can people find you?
Thank you. It was a real pleasure joining you. And you can find me on Twitter at Callum7McFadden, and you can follow my work on World Football Index or cmfootballwriting.com.
Yeah, definitely make sure you check that out. Really good writer. And check out his Twitter as well. Make sure you follow him. His art is there. Obviously, I've been Callum at the United Road. New article was out today on Manuel Ugarte as well. On the unitedroad.com. It was the latest article and it's a big picture of Ugarte on it, so you can't really miss it. It's also linked in my Twitter profile. It's pinned, so if you want to just check it out there and search. Like I say, we'll be back Tuesday. I don't know who the guest is going to be. I'm hoping to try and get Keane on soon as he's back at podcast now. Like I say, thanks for watching and I'll see you all very soon. Cheers.